Parents of school children in Durham who get bused to class may want to have a backup plan in place for tomorrow. First student bus company drivers could be on strike as of midnight. The good news is the company and the union are still at the negotiating table. CTV's Janice Golding is live in Ajax, where the union held an update just a short time ago. Janice, what'd they say?
Ken, essentially 10,000 students may not have a way to get to or from school tomorrow if their school bus drivers walk off the job, which is what they're threatening to do. Now, in total, there are about 260 bus drivers, and their union, Unifor Local 4268, served First Student Canada with notice that they will walk off the job at 12:01 a.m. if they don't reach what they call a fair deal. Now, Unifor says drivers assume responsibility for our children's safety, and yet they remain at the bottom of the pay scale when it comes to professional drivers. In a nutshell, the union says drivers are working several hours a day without being paid for them, and the union argues all the unpaid hours they work put drivers at below minimum wage, placing them at about $12 an hour. They say the workers want to be paid for 7 hours a day, while some are making half that. Students from 103 schools would be impacted at both the Durham Public District School Board and at the Durham Catholic Board in Ajax, Brock, Oshawa, Pickering, Scugog, Uxbridge and Whitby. We're also told students in Scarborough will also be impacted.
You have a driver that's in Ajax, for example, picks up their school bus, has to drive, their run is in Scarborough. The period of time that they're in their school bus driving from Ajax to Scarborough is unpaid. They get paid only when they pick up the first child, and then the pay stops when they drop the last child off. And so all that period of time in between is unpaid. Inspections that they have to do in the morning is unpaid. The time that they have to warm up the school buses prior to getting the children on the bus is unpaid. So if you take all of that time and divide it by the amount of time that they're actually working, they're making lower than minimum wage.
Again, the strike deadline is 12:01 a.m. and we'll have updates as they become available. Reporting live from Janice Golding. Now back to Andrea.
Thank you, Janice.
Roughly 10,000 students could be looking for a way to get to school tomorrow morning. Bus drivers in Durham Region and Toronto's East End are poised to walk off the job at midnight. Drivers for two First Student Canada branches will be in a legal strike position if a new deal isn't reached before the clock strikes 12. There are two key sticking points in negotiations: low wages and the unpaid time drivers spend picking up and maintaining buses. Talks have been ongoing throughout the day, and the union remains hopeful that a strike can be avoided.
We need to get a contract. We need to make sure that our drivers are there in the morning to transport these children safely, but that these drivers are paid properly and that there's no free time here, that they're absolutely paid for every minute that they work.
103 public and Catholic schools in Durham Region would be affected. That includes Ajax, Whitby and Oshawa. First Student also provides busing for 19 Toronto Catholic schools. That means 1,900 Scarborough area students would need to find another way to get to class tomorrow in the event of a strike.
Unfortunately, there is no way to provide alternate transportation. The information we have is that the carriers just do not have the capacity to provide alternate transportation vehicles and drivers for the routes that would be impacted. Parents have been informed that they would have to make their own arrangements to get their children to and from school.
Toronto's Catholic Board is working to provide extended after-hours care at some schools. 9 Toronto District public schools would also be affected. All school boards involved have sent letters home with students and are posting regular updates on their websites. You can tune in to City News at 11 and Breakfast Television tomorrow morning, as we'll be keeping a close eye on the impending strike.
Contract talks continue ahead of a midnight strike deadline for school bus drivers in Durham. Unifor, the union representing drivers with First Student in Ajax and Brooklyn, says it hopes to soon deliver good news, but for now, there's no deal. A strike would affect 10,000 students in the Durham District School Board and the Durham Catholic District School Board. It also could affect some Toronto public and Catholic students who live in Durham. Wages and unpaid time are two of the outstanding issues.
A school bus strike could leave 10,000 students stranded without a ride tomorrow morning in Durham Region and parts of Toronto, but the union that represents the drivers says it's feeling optimistic. The First Student Canada bus drivers could strike at midnight tonight if a deal isn't reached. Dozens of public and Catholic schools will be affected, but talks are still in progress. TDSB says if a deal isn't reached, they will not be able to replace the bus drivers or contract another bus company to service the routes. In Toronto alone, 28 public and Catholic schools will be impacted.
And parents have been advised to make alternate plans.
School bus drivers are set to strike 6 hours from now. The majority of students affected are in Durham Region, but there are also Toronto schools on the list. CTV's Janice Golding is live in Ajax, where the talks continue as the deadline approaches. Janice, how many students are we talking about?
So, Ryder, we're talking about 10,000 students, and of course, their parents will also be affected. Now, at around the noon hour, we were told that the two sides were very far apart. However, about an hour ago, with the most recent update, we are learning that the two sides are making some progress, although there are still some major stumbling blocks. Some 10,000 students in Durham and Scarborough count on their buses to get them to and from school every day. But 260 drivers from First Student Canada could be shutting their doors to students as of 12:01 a.m., walking the picket line until they get what they call a fair deal. Feel like you're being paid enough?
We are definitely not.
We do feel like we're being taken advantage of.
Unifor Local 4268 says its drivers are working several hours a day without pay. For example, travel time from the bus depot to schools or homes is not covered.
They get paid only when they pick up the first child, and then the pay stops when they drop the last child off. And so all that period of time in between is unpaid. Inspections that they have to do in the morning is unpaid.
We asked First Student Canada about this issue. So are you willing to pay them for those hours that they are working for free?
What I can tell you is that those discussions are at the table right now. We are talking to them with their union representatives at that table for those particular negotiation points.
Parents are worried about tomorrow.
I don't think it should be allowed, to be honest. I think that's a necessity, you know?
It's going to be hard on the parents, but...
Durham Student Transportation Services is assuming the worst, issuing a letter saying as of the morning of Thursday, November 30th, 2017, there will be no school bus services for routes serviced by First Student Ajax and First Student Brooklyn. Meanwhile, the Toronto Public and Catholic boards, which have 27 schools that could be impacted, are also saying there will be no bus service in the event of a strike. Students from 103 schools in Ajax, Brock, Oshawa, Pickering, Scugog, Uxbridge, Whitby and Scarborough could all be affected. The union says factoring in all the unpaid work that drivers are doing, they're actually making about $12 an hour. In fact, the drivers we spoke to today say they're making less than $50 a day. Reporting live, I'm Janice Golding. Now back to Zoraida.
Thank you, Janice.